Hey, Luke and Emma. Sorry we missed you in class this morning. I just wanted to give you an overview of what we did so that you guys don't feel completely lost. And yeah, if you could just check in with me and let me know what your status is. It's hard to tell these days, who's on quarantine and who's actually confirmed and who's just maybe not feeling well for other reasons. So, um, yeah, if you can just give me an update as to what's going on with you guys, I'd appreciate it. Otherwise, I'm just going to run you through what we talked about this morning in class. We did a little bit of housekeeping details. I posted some community documents for everyone to access. You can see those here. Take note, I'm in week 2 of the learning guide on Canvas. And yeah, just in reflecting on last week and what went well and what could go a little bit more smoothly, I decided to solicit the help of the community, the learning community, and just see who would be willing to help provide some tech support. For instance, kind of dropped the ball this morning with you guys. I should have pressed record on Zoom so that we did have one Zoomer. And yeah, had I pressed record, I'd be sending you that video right now rather than making a whole new screencast. So, a few people that would be willing to maybe help with that kind of tech support, remind me to do these kinds of things, or even if a table buddy is quarantined and not able to come to class, to go ahead and pull up Zoom on your own computers and include that person that way. So that's one of the options for a community helper. We are sanitizing the tables after each class, so people are invited to sign up and show their willingness to sanitize with the spray after class, and then also people to keep track of the prayer list for prayer requests, and also maybe even to show care and concern for those who aren't with us through writing a note or an email or something like that, so that those people don't feel forgotten and isolated. And hopefully that's not how you're feeling right now. Again, just let me know what your week or the next couple of weeks looks like for you, if you're going to be quarantined long term or not. I don't see your names on the student services list, but I do know that they're maybe a little bit behind with those. So we spent a little bit of time looking at our prayer requests. You can see a couple of new ones are there. So keep going back to that. Let's hold each other up in prayer as we go through this semester. I think we especially need that this year. All right, so that was kind of the housekeeping stuff. I also made a seating chart. So when you guys come back to class, wherever you sit, that's going to be your seat for the next month. So choose wisely. We took a look at this Alpha Christian School case study. That was our next stop. I gave the students a chance to discuss in groups how they related to that case study. Maybe it sounded familiar, like maybe this sounds like a description of the school you grew up in or of a school that you know of. So the author of the book that this chapter came from is Donovan Graham, and yeah, he's raising a complaint basically. So we discussed a little bit about, why do we see that this maybe what we're reading here in this case study is not an example of teaching Christianly necessarily. It's maybe seen as good teaching, but again, we want to kind of push to the excellence and teach in a way that's distinctly Christian. So that's what we were looking at this morning and discussing. So give that some thought. I'll go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint that we used. It's linked here on week 2 learning guide, and you can go through the slides, and also the discussion questions for that case study are embedded in this PowerPoint. On slide 8 specifically is where you'll find the questions for this case study. So I'll just kind of look at this with you quick a second. These slides look familiar, hopefully. So these were the questions that the students were discussing in their groups. So give that some thought. And yeah, maybe if you're willing to share your experiences when you come back to class, that would be great. We took a look at this statement. This is Dort's founder's vision. I asked the class, where do we find this on campus? And somebody was able to identify that it's right in the center of campus, right by the clock tower. So see if you can find that when you're back on campus. We noted that two of the most powerful words in this statement is the word appended and permeated. That's my opinion. Those are my two favorite words. But we talked about what that looks like, what it is to permeate our learning environment, our teaching with the spirit of Christianity rather than merely integrate it. Noted that integration involves taking two separate things and bringing them together and kind of mixing them together. So when we think about Christian education, quite often we use the words faith and learning, and we talk about integrating faith and learning. And while that is a goal, that's a good thing, I believe that we can do more. It's not just taking these two things like they're two different things and bringing them together, but seeing faith as something that's inherent in learning. And regardless of whether we're teaching from a biblical perspective or a secular perspective, what we believe and what we have faith in is going to come forth in what we teach. So being discerning and looking at that carefully and kind of going back to that foundation and making sure that what we are demonstrating faith in is the one true God and what he has created and how he has created. It's not necessarily human endeavors or human accomplishment, science, technology, all of these things that come forth in our teaching and learning as being, somewhat the idols of our time, but making sure that what is at the root of what we're teaching is biblical truth. So we'll continue to unpack that. That's a big topic that, we're not done discussing that today. Another word that we focused in on is this word appended, and that has that sense of, adding something on, like our appendages. They seem to kind of like be kind of attached to the main corpus. And so when we think about education and things that we append, if we look closely at some of these elements that we consider Christian per se, we need to be careful that we're not just tacking them on to education, but we're seeing them as something that comes forth from the core. So using the case study in the Donovan Graham book kind of as a discussion starter, we reflected on chapter 2 of your Van Dyke reading. And we made a list on the board of some of the things that oftentimes get appended to education. And if you start in chapter 2, on page 19, you'll see some of these appendages. Van Dyke kind of allots a new section for each one. Some of them are, for instance, devotions, chapel. Moving over to page 21, he mentions modeling Christian behavior, evangelizing students, teaching from a Christian or providing a Christian perspective on subject matter, in the sense like if you remember in the Alpha Christian School chapter, it talked about how that school only used Christian textbooks. So that's that sense that we have to impose a Christian perspective on teaching. So let's question that. Do we have to add it in, or is perspective already there, and it's a lens that we can look at learning from, and our job as teachers is to uncover that perspective and to look at learning and teaching and the subject area through that lens and call it out to our students and show them how to see things in that way with that worldview. Page 24, another appendage that Van Dyke mentions is service projects, off-campus service projects specifically, tough discipline and rigor. And page 25 mentions imprinting truth on impressionable minds, and that's that kind of that direct teaching style where sometimes Christian educators feel like they need to tell students what to believe. Okay, so we're calling that appendage into question as well. Another one on page 26 is kind of a WWJD mentality, where the idea that we need to go back to the basics, and if Jesus didn't do something in the Bible, then we don't need to do it in our classrooms, and whatever Jesus did, that's what we need to replicate. So the point of those appendages are not that they're bad or that they're wrong in and of themselves. There is some redeeming qualities to all of them, but none of them, or even all of them, do not sum up what Christian or teaching Christianly is. And so some of the discussion in the class today was along the lines of, oftentimes when we think we're teaching Christianly, we know how to say the right words, and we know how to, sound a certain way or even look a certain way, but other actions tell a completely different story. For instance, using the right words and even preaching the gospel and using, devotions and prayer. But then when it comes to showing grace in actual practice, it seems like that's a place where our talk doesn't always match our walk, or our audio doesn't match our video. And so just being aware of that and redefining then what does it really mean to teach Christianly, and not relegating teaching Christianly only to Christian schools, or assuming that if you are a Christian, you are teaching Christianly. It's much bigger than that. Also, if we're depending on these appendages to make our teaching distinctively Christian, then that will completely eliminate teaching Christianly from a non-private setting, or like even in a public school. If chapel and prayer and devotions are what it means to teach Christianly, well, then we've completely relegated that kind of teaching only to Christian schools. And I'd like to challenge that thought, and broaden our understanding, because it's more than what we say. It's how we teach, and it's how we interact with our students. And so those are the kinds of things we're going to explore more deeply. And so that probably leaves you with more questions, but that's a good thing. We're spending the rest of this week talking about the biblical foundation of education, and we will continue to read through the Van Dyke chapters. So for Wednesday, I'm assigning the next 2 chapters, 5 and 6. We'll continue the discussion. We'll be working through this PowerPoint. Specifically, we're talking about the calling the task and the office of a Christian teacher. So you can continue to, hopefully you'll be back on Wednesday. Let me know if you're not going to be, but if you are gone again, I will sure try to remember to record and include you guys in Zoom. And, but yeah, that's where we're going. By the end of the week, there is a discussion board due for the Van Dyke chapters 1 through 8. And it'll just be a place for you to reflect and to consider how your thinking has changed regarding teaching Christianly since, we began about a week ago. So, all right, Emma and Luke, that's kind of a quick summary of what we covered this morning. I hope that helps, and I hope to see you in class soon. Okay, bye-bye.